Let's create our very first particle system. So we'll do this by going up to Game Object, Particle System. Now a particle system consists of particles. So you can see if you scroll out here, you can actually see the entire length of the particle system itself. So the particles start off right here at the origin, and then they slowly spread out, and then they die off at the very top right here. So this is our shuriken particle system. Now over here, we can actually simulate the particle system within our scene window. And this just makes it easier to actually see our particle system within the scene without having to actually jump into the game and play our game to actually see how these particle systems look. So if you want to pause it, click on the pause button right here. You can then take a look at your particle system from any angle at a specific point within your particle system simulation. Click simulate once again and it continues to play. You can adjust the playback speed over here. So with a lower value of 1, something like 0.5, you can see it slows down. If you go above 1, it's going to increase that value. And then 1 is going to return back to its normal speed. Then we have the playback time, so how quickly or how long has this particle system been playing. Over here we have the particle system component, and the particle system component is comprised of a bunch of different types of modules. So we have all these modules down here, which we'll be covering in subsequent lessons. But first I want to just take a look at this first section. At the very top we have the duration, which is the duration of the particle system. How long does that last? Then we have looping directly underneath that. It's going to be checked on by default. So it's going to be continuing looping this particle system over and over again. This is going to be good for things like smoke or fire or anything of that sort that needs a looping type of effect to look realistic. Now if you have it unchecked, it's going to continue playing until it runs out of particles or the duration has been met. Underneath that we have the pre-warm. And to best illustrate how pre-warm works, I'm going to go and check this on. And then we're going to hit play, and then we'll check it off, and then we'll hit play again. So with pre-warm, this allows us to go through a cycle of the particle system. So it looks like this particle system has been playing the whole time before we even start our game. Now, once again, this is going to be good for smoke or fire, where you don't want that particle system to start right when you start your game. Now, if I were to uncheck this, and try this once again, you're actually going to see the particle system start, which is going to look a little bit unrealistic for smoke or fire. So pre-warm just allows us to have that particle system playing before we even get to that part of the game or before we even play that game to see that particle system. Underneath that we have the start delay, so if you want to have a delay to your particle system before it actually plays, you can input a specific value in here. Underneath that we have the start lifetime, and the start lifetime refers to the lifetime of the particles themselves. So they start off down here, then they finally die off right here, and this is determined by the start lifetime. So if we were to increase this to say 10, you could say they last a lot longer, and this is because of the lifetime value that we just set. Set that back down to 5. Underneath that, we have the start speed, which is just going to refer to the speed of the particles whenever they start off. So the start speed is set to 5 right now. That's what it looks like. If we increase this to 10, you can see they start off a little bit faster. Underneath that, we have the start size, and right now they're set to 1, so you can actually see the individual particles, but if we want to use this as a smoke particle system, we can increase this to say 10, and you can see it looks a little bit like smoke. Next, we have the start rotation. Now, we're not going to be going over the rotation in this video just because it's a little bit hard to see the rotation on these types of particles. Once we get into the texturing aspects, we can actually see the rotation happening. So we're just going to leave it blank for now. Now, you will notice that each one of these sections right here has this little triangle icon next to it. This allows us to pull up a separate drop-down menu. And each one of these drop-down menus is going to have something specific to it. So a lot of these are going to have constant, curve, random between two constants, and random between two curves. Now curves are something we'll be covering a lot in subsequent lessons, but if we click on curve, you can see we can actually pull up a curve. Then we can select preset curves down here. So if I want a gradual change from 0 to 5 right here within the start lifetime, I can use a curve for that. I can also use the between two constants or random between two curves. For now, I'm just going to leave this at constant. If we jump down to the start color, we also have something very similar. We can either choose color, gradient, or a combination of either of those. So if I want to change the color, just left click on the bar right here, and you can check a different color altogether. Now underneath that, we have the gravity modifier. Now the gravity modifier is going to be good for applying gravity to our particles. Right now with it set to 0, there's no gravity being applied to our particles at all. But if we want to create something like a fountain effect, you would increase the gravity modifier to a positive value. And now we have a very simple spout effect, or a very simple fountain effect right here. You can see they're starting off right here, then they're slowly curving downward because of the gravity being applied to them. If you go in the opposite direction with a negative value, you can see they start floating up much, much easier. It's almost as if the gravity is being applied from the opposite direction. Set that back down to 0. Directly underneath that, we have the inherent velocity. This allows us to apply velocity to those particles. So as they start off, they have a set speed, and they increase in speed as they are alive. Underneath that, we have the simulation space. So simulation space of local means it's always going to be using the local space over here. So if I were to move this around, you can see it continually goes up and down with no change in the particle movement. But if I were to change this to say world, and if you move this around, you can see that the particles actually follow along with the movement of the particle system itself. Underneath that, we have play on awake. This allows us to play our particle system whenever we start our game. Now, unless we otherwise specify, this is always going to be checked on. If we uncheck this, it's no longer going to play unless we actually use a script or something of that sort to actually play our particle system. Then finally, we have our max particles. So the max particles is going to be the maximum amount of particles that we can use within this particle system. Now, depending on what type of particle system you're creating, maybe a smoke trail or smoke, fire, something of that sort, you want to increase or decrease this to get a specific effect. Now, if you have looping unchecked and you run out of max particles, you're going to see a gap between when it ends and when it starts again based off the max particles and the duration. So that is the very first section of our particles. We're going to be going over the emission module in our next lesson.